Okay, sagt der heilige Gemara. My chutz megita. I didn't check the sound. I did not check the sound, but I assume the sound. I'm going to assume the sound is good. If anybody can't hear me, I will just ask them to turn the camera on to wave, so I'll chop. Otherwise, I'll assume that the sound is good. My chutz megita. So the Mishnah starts off with if they shecht the paraduma chutz megita out of its dugout. Omer shlokish chutz mimakim haboduk law. It means out of the place that the boduk law. So Rashi l'shoich dosham she'ein tachtea kever hatayim. They checked in that spot to make sure that there's no kever down there underneath where they're going to be standing to shecht the paradum. So that's what it means. This Makam Agita was specially checked to make sure there was no tumor.
That's going to be very hard when Har Zaysim has become a graveyard.
Basic forest.
What?
It's a basic forest.
Yes. How are you going to make sure there's like maybe 10,000 kvarim there or more?
They must have used a sonar. But I don't know. I don't know how they would have been voided. But we're going to soon see the Gemara is going to ask. There were Mesei Mabul that were there. How in the world are they going to clear it out of Mesei Mabul? So that's a good question. Let me ask you a question. When did Harization become full of Mason? Was it always that way?
Okay, so I can tell you that as far back as the Nevi'im, because they have a Chelkas HaNevi'im there. So as far back as the Nevi'im, which there was a second Beis HaMikdash going on, first Beis HaMikdash, I should say.
It had to be first Beis HaMikdash. Do you know where on Harization the Chelkas HaNevi'im is?
Pretty much exactly opposite the Harabah, where the Beis HaMikdash, where the Mishkan.
I know at the bottom of
even the top.
Basin, where Yad Avra, where Yad what's it called? Yad Avshalom is there, and there's a Chaya Hanovi's cavers there. So you're saying the place of the name were up on top?
Yes, it's actually called Chelik HaNevi'im.
Which Nevi'im are buried there?
Can't remember, but familiar names.
I don't know. So I wonder how they dealt with that, or maybe I guess they made sure to keep one area clear.
Yeah,
but not only had to be clear, the whole route had to be clear.
The whole route has to be clear.
Well, the route to get there.
Oh, right, the route to get there. But what about the airspace?
What do you mean by airspace?
In other words, where you shecht the Paraduma,
right?
The airspace between, that's on a mountain, and Harabais is a mountain.
Right. So the whole route,
the airspace between
the whole route. Right.
Yeah.
If there's any mace buried there, the tumah is bakas v'las. It goes all the way up. So if you walked anywhere where there would be a mace beneath you, you would become tumah.
Yeah. So that's the walking route. But what about the air route?
Well, even the walking on the air route, you're both going to be subject to the same tumah. Tumah that might be underground, that's bakas v'las. Nothing's buried in the air. Something buried under the ground.
No, I understand that. But between where the shechting has to happen and where the Kaddish Kedoshim is, between that there could be many graves.
But as long as he doesn't walk there, he's okay.
Okay.
It's like the Bells of Besmedrish, when they built it using satellite imagery to make sure that there was no church in between the Bells of Besmedrish and Harabayas. Because when they built the Bells of Besmedrish in Bells in Europe, they built the Bells Rabbi built it with Ruach HaKodesh, saying that there's a straight line from here to the base Kodesh HaKodeshim where there's no church. They picked like a perfect spoke, so to speak, that won't go through any churches. So they didn't have the same Ruach HaKodesh when they built the current Bells of Besmedrish, so they used a satellite to make sure that there are no churches in a straight line. Ela Amar B'Yechanan, Kegoyin Sheshachta Lifnim Min Choymas Yerushalayim. maybe you know what it means. Chutz mimakim. I'm sorry. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan. How could you say that's Pshat Reish Lakish? But like all Eretz Yisrael Badukihi, all of Eretz Yisrael is Baduk. Now, the question: what do you mean all of Eretz Yisrael is Baduk? There's not a single caver in Eretz Yisrael. Not there is, but there's no lost kavarim in Eretz Yisrael. Any caver that is there would be marked. Ella Amar Rabbi Yochanan. That's not what it means. Chutz Megita. What Chutz Megita means? You're supposed to be shechting the paraduma out of Yerushalayim. And you shechted it in Yerushalayim. That's where the shaila is, and Avada, the Mishnah says it's not possible. I'm sorry. I guess we learn from there that it has to be out of Yerushalayim. I don't know the sugya of paraduma, but probably that's what they learn from. Why didn't the Gemara suggest that it was shechted shaloi keneged Pesach? We know the zrika has to be keneged Pesach. Yeah, and we learned that a shechita has to be in that same position. Shenemar v'shachat v'hiza maza also keneged Pesach. Af shechita keneged Pesach. V'chita imedoloi makish, and if you're going to hold that they're not makish, we're not makish, that couldn't have been the option. It couldn't have been shot that it was shaloi keneged Pesach. Via Itmar, we learned sarfa shaloi keneged Pesach. If you burnt the paraduma, not keneged Pesach. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Psula. Rabbi Yochanan is possible. Rabbi Oishia Amar Ksheira. Why does Rabbi Yochanan say Psula? Rabbi Yochanan Psula v'saraf v'hiza. You have to do the zrika keneged Pesach, and we learn from the Shreifet of Hiza, they're right next to each other. So right near Hiza, right before that says v'saraf. So we say that the same place where the hazah is required to be, that's where the shreif has to be. Rabbi Oishia Amar Ksheira. Because it says al pirsha yisaref. No, you don't make that hekesh. Al pirsha means makom she peireshes lemisa shelm teis reifasa. The whole requirement is that right where the animal dies, that's where the animal should be burnt into ashes. It doesn't have to be burnt into ashes where the zrika will be. Zok to Gemara Amri einachanami. Einachanami, he could have said that as well, but it's a loy mi boy kamar. The Mishnah is saying a chiddush. Loy mi boy kamar. Loy mi boy chutz l'chayma. I don't even need to tell you that if it was chutz l'chayma, the rechu karacha, where it's further away from the place where it needs to be. Even if you shechted the carbon, the paraduma, the kravi karva, it's even closer to the base kodesh HaKodeshim. Maybe it should be kosher even though you didn't shech them in the right place. Kamash v'lo. Amar Mar. So let's analyze this discussion between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, and it's going to lead to a fascinating Agadah Gemara. Amar Mar. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. V'alekol Eretz Yisrael Baduki. Rabbi Yochanan claimed that all of Eretz Yisrael is Baduka. There's no chance that there's going to be a hidden caver there that you could become tamei with not knowing. But my commitment, what is this machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish if all of Eretz Yisrael is Baduka? The teretz is Mar Sovar Yorad Mabel Eretz Yisrael. Rish Lakish held that there was a Mabel in Eretz Yisrael. So who knows how many bodies of people that died during the Mabel are buried way beneath the ground. They were sucked down in the mud and lost forever. There could be tons of corpses down there. Therefore, there's no such thing as Baduka, even in Eretz Yisrael. You could have been careful to mark every grave that you have in recent history, but the people from the Mabel, that's unrecoverable, and therefore Eretz Yisrael can't be Baduka. Umar Sover in Rabbi Yochanan notes, Lo Yoret, there was no Mabel in Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael did not have a Mabel. Amar Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak Ushnei Mikra Echad. They both died in the same pasuk and reached a different conclusion. It says Ben Adam. This is a pasuk. The Torah Shalom says the pasuk in Yechezkel. Benodam Omerla. This is a pasuk talking about the corruption and the chet that was going on in Eretz Yisrael. Benodam Omerla at Eretz loy mitayhari. You are a land that's not tar. Loy gushma b'yom zam. You were not spared in the Yom Zam in the days of the Mabel. So the question is, do you read this with a lotion of bitmiyah? At Eretz Mitayeri, are you a land that's not tar? Were you destroyed by a Mabel to indicate that it is tar? There was no Mabel there, or it might be read b'nichusa, which would just be stating that it's an Eretz that's not tar because there was a Mabel there. So let's see the Gemara inside. Ben Adam Amar Law at Eretz loy mutaharihi loy gushma b'yom zam. Rabbi Yechon Sofer atmu matmakra. The pasuk, the Navi is asking bitmiya Eretz Yisrael miloy mituhara at. Aren't you supposed to be tar? Hlum yardu alecha geshamim b'yom zam. Did you suffer from the Mabel? In other words, the pasuk is stating that there was no Mabel in Eretz Yisrael. But for Shlokish over kipashte, it's not lashon bitmiya. It's as a matter of fact, Eretz loy mituhara at. Eretz Yisrael is not a makom tar. Because they were Meisei Mabel, and therefore there's definitely Tumah in Eretz Yisrael. I'm going to prove to you that in fact there was a Mabel in Eretz Yisrael, because it says in the Bryce as follows: there were areas, yards in Yerushalayim, benuyos ala sela, that were built on rock. And there was an oil underneath them. Why? Because we wanted these platforms to be completely tar with absolutely no chashash of tumah. So just in case there was tumah buried beneath the ground, unknown, they would raise a platform so that there would be an oil. When there's an oil, the tumah does not penetrate it. And therefore the tumah would not penetrate the platform that was made out of rock that's not makabel tumah. And therefore, anyone standing on that platform is guaranteed to be tahar. Why did they do that? Because we know that there was a very big kula that they used to have when they prepared the paradum. And the kula that they had is they would make the kohen tamei, they would make him touch his sheretz before he dealt with the paraduma, before he processed it, and then he would toivel. The halach is someone who touches a sheretz and toivels, he's called a tful yoim, and he's tamei until the evening. He will not be able to touch kachim. But we learn out of the Torah, Chazal teach us that a tful yoim is allowed to be oisik in paraduma. The Tzedokim said a tful yoim may not oisik in paraduma. So in order to show the Tzedokim that they're wrong, as a policy, anytime the kohen was involved in the paraduma, he first purposely became tamei by touching a sheretz, and then he was toivel. But they didn't want that people should not take paraduma seriously, and they should be lax with its kedusha, especially since they make the kohen tamei each time. So because of that, they were crazy. I shouldn't use the word crazy. They were extremely makpid on every other issue of tumah v'tahira, and that's why they made sure that there was no tumah that came into contact with anybody involved in the processing of the paraduma. So therefore, they took women who were pregnant, the yoldois, they would give birth on this platform, so their child would be born in a place where there was no chance for them ever to become tamei. Sham b'nein lepara. They raised their children to be able to be oisik in the paraduma. So I don't know how they picked these women, but they picked women whose children, they would be the ones that would be chosen to deal with paraduma, and they had to prepare for this lifestyle from birth. And how did they get around? They had to go, they were the ones who had to go to the source of the water, the spring, to draw water. They have to leave this platform. They have to leave their cocoon. So they did it in a way where they wouldn't be subject to any tumah beneath them. So again, Rav was asking, how do you get around there's tumah there because they traveled in a tumah-proof mobile. What was that? Umavin Shavarim, they brought oxen, Valgabayim Dalsois, and they built platforms on top of the Shavarim, and the Vitinoikas Yoishvun Alayim. The Tinoikas would sit on top of them. So no matter what they went over, the tumah wouldn't penetrate those little platforms because there was also an oil beneath them. Again, V'koisoi shall even biyadam. They carried stoneware which are not mekabel tumah, and they lowered it down into the spring when they got there. Umalu v'yoshevu b'kleimim, but they remained seated so that they were never subject to any type of tumah. So what do you see from here? You see there must have been tumah. Why would they go so crazy to be so careful to protect themselves from tumas hatayim if, according to Rabbi Yochanan, there was no tumas hatayim in Eretz Yisrael because there was never a mabel there, so no bodies are lost. Zokt Gemara, Amar Avhuna b'Reder B'Shua, Maila also b'Parah. That's exactly the point. Itaka wasn't necessary. The Baal, they wanted to show the Chaymer in a Paraduma because they make it be done through a kohen that is a Tvul Yom. They were extremely makbid on any milas hatahira in every other aspect. So you're right, it wouldn't have been necessary because the likelihood of having a lost caver was very, very low, but this was the extra caution that they did to show that Paradum is a very serious affair.
Why are they so concerned about the mabel? What about, like, before Klal Yisrael came to Eretz Yisrael, the Canaanim lived there for centuries? Or
I don't know. What about, I thought a goy is not matama.
So why are we worried about the mabel?
I'm not sure. But you're asking that throughout the generations before Klal Yisrael came into Eretz Yisrael, surely nobody was monitoring it then. But I think what it was is they probably checked. They maybe they checked up to 10 feet down. What you could normally check, but what you can't check is like really in the depths. That's what they can. And it's only the Meisei Mabel that would have been sucked down very deep in the mud, because we're going to see that's what the discussion is. If there's bodies in the mud that's deep down, that wouldn't be accessible to check. Any normal depth, they would have been able to detect. They would have tested for it.
How do you do that? How do you test all of Eretz Yisrael? Every square foot of Eretz Yisrael, to see if there was ever a caver there. It just doesn't sound.
It would definitely be an impractical, very difficult task.
Yes.
Unless it means that there were many areas that were cleared. But the problem is, it would be impossible to clear any area if we have a concern of Meisei Mabel. So maybe when it says that Eretz Yisrael is Baduka, it doesn't mean that there's no mace. It means there's enough area in Eretz Yisrael that's Baduk where everything can get done without having any concern.
Sounds reasonable.
That's for a normal mace. But for Meisei Midbar, that would have been impossible to detect. But that's a good point. I don't know. Eisvei Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan had a kasha to Rish Lakish, so now Rabbi Yochanan is going to prove, in fact, that there was no mabel in Eretz Yisrael. Pam echad, once upon a time, matzu atomois belishkas dir eitzim. They found bones of a human, which were tamei, in the lishkas dir eitzim. It's in the chamber in the base of Mikdash where they would prepare the wood and deworm the wood in the base of Mikdash itself. So they wanted to make a takana, such a thing happened, they need to put safeguards in place. So what they wanted to do was uvikshur ligzar tuma al Yerushalayim. They wanted to say that we need to treat Yerushalayim as if there's a mace buried there that we didn't discover, and therefore anything that went over Yerushalayim would be tamei. And Amar Rabbi Yishua Raglav, Rabbi Yishua got up and says, no such takana we would allow. The Amar loy busha uchlima hilanu. Shenigzar tuma al iravoisenu. Is it not a busha and a chlima that we should be geyser tuma on the city of our forefathers? Aye meisei mabel. Where are the meisei mabel? In other words, so Rashi should nimtsoyim b'shar makaymes v'kan nimtsoyim. There's meisei mabel everywhere in the world, but they're not here. Aye Mason Nebuchadnezzar. Where are they? Harugin Nebuchadnezzar, Rashi says. Shaharagba. There were many people, Rahman Litzlon, killed by Nebuchadnezzar, yet v'hufnu kulam. Why is always makbid to move away and to clear away all of the mason? The ain echad matuba, and we are sure that there's no mace ear that was left that was not marked. Al karchenu bedukahu. Yerushalayim is pristine. It's baduk. There's no reason to make a gzera that Yerushalayim should be tam. The Gemara hachi. The fact that Yeshua is saying that wouldn't that indicate that there was no mabel in Yerushalayim when he's saying with such force that where's the Mesa Mabel? There's no Mesa Mabel in Eretz Yisrael. Correct the Gemara. Ulitamech Haruga Nebuchadnezzar Hachanami Dolay Havu. Are you going to tell me that there was no Haruga Nebuchadnezzar? They were. Ella, what was his suggestion? Havu Ufaninu. They were there and they were cleared away. So maybe that's what he was saying. As far as the Mabel is concerned, Hachanami Havu Ufaninu. They were there, but they were cleared away. But not that there was no Mabel at all in Eretz Yisrael. But Frank the Gemara Avnu, if you're going to say that they were all cleared away, well then we're back to square one. Ha'ivni, they are cleared away. Dr. Gemara, Nehida Ifnim Yerushalayim, they might have been cleared away from Yerushalayim, but Mikula Eretz Yisrael lo Ifni. So once again, Rish Lakish held that there were Mesim in Eretz Yisrael, but there were Mesim in Eretz Yisrael, but maybe in Yerushalayim they were cleared, but not necessarily would you say that there was no Mabel. Ikadamri, there is another version of how this discussion happened. Eser Rish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. And so Rish Lakish is going to prove, in fact, that there were the Mabel. The Mabel did happen in Eretz Yisrael. What did the Bishua say? Aye meise Mabel, aye meise Nebuchadnezzar. My love, midahana have, haninami have. If there were definitely mesim in the days of Nebuchadnezzar, surely there were mesim from the Mabel. In other words, just like by Nebuchadnezzar there were mesim, so too by the Mabel there were mesim, and maybe by Nebuchadnezzar they were cleared away. Zok Gemara, Midiya, who said Ha Chadisa, Vachadisa. By the Mabel there were never any mesim there because the Mabel didn't happen in Eretz Yisrael. By Nebuchadnezzar there were, but they were cleared away. Actually, the Gemara is another kasha. It says by the Mabel Mikol Asher Bacharova Mesim. Anything that was on dry land died. Zokt Yochanan Bishlam Ladidi. I'm sorry, Rish Lakish. Bishlam Ladidi. The Amina Yard Mabel Eretz Yisrael. That there was a Mabel in Eretz Yisrael. Mishum Hachi Mesu. That's why they died. Why did they die? Because they got flooded. Everything that was originally on the dry land got flooded, and everyone died. But according to you, Rabbi Yochanan, that there were no Mabel in Eretz Yisrael, Amai Mesu. From what did they die? If there was no Mabel there, why isn't it that the people and the animals in Eretz Yisrael didn't survive? It was so hot, the heat was so intense that they died from the heat. The Aveir of the Dor Mabel was with heat. I guess it means with passion. And that's why they were punished with very hot water. So even though they weren't actually killed by drowning, but hot steam is very, very dangerous. It says in the pasuk, "Vayeshoiku hamoyim." After the Mabel was over, the Torah says, "Vayeshoiku hamayim." The mayim calmed down, and Vayeshoiku, we're going to prove, means to cool down from the heat of passion. Because Uksiv Osam in the Megillah, it's already the Bludish strikes again. Shambal Pidim, v'Chamas Hamelech Shachal. Devalti. My son called me and says in yeshiva everyone's saying that last night Maduris was sleeping with a bunch of spics, and tonight he's sleeping with a bunch of Satmar Chassidim. What? In Brooklyn, yeah. And that's what they say in the Litvish Yeshiva, right? That's what the boys say in the Litvish Yeshiva. Zok the Gemara, Ikad Amrei. Eisvei Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan asked Rish Lakish the following kasha. It says, Mikol Asher Bacharava Mesu. All the people on dry land died. So Rabbi Yochanan says, makes sense according to me. Even though it was dry, they died. And as we said from Rabbi Chisda, they died because of the heat. But it was dry. People who were on dry land died. How is that possible? Because of the heat. What do you mean charava? What do you mean everybody on dry land died? There was nobody on dry land. Everything was flooded. So Gemara, it means charava shahitzim meikara. It means the land that was once upon a time dry, that now was flooded, everyone died there. Fact Gemara, v'amai karile charava. Could you have Chisda like Rabbi Chisda? Rabbi Chisda, v'dar amabel l'nigzira gzera al dogim shebayam. Only creatures that were originally on dry land died, but fish that were always in the sea never was covered by the gzera of the mabel. L'nigzira gzera al dogim shebayam shenemar mikol asher b'charava mesu v'loy dogim shebayam, but not the fish. So b'charava doesn't mean it was actually dry during the mabel. It means the land that was dry and anything on it was subject to the mabel, but not creatures that lived in the yam. So which is Rabbi Yochanan. Hainu, now this is getting exciting. Hainu to come rima hasam. That's how the re'im, which is a huge animal, that no way would it fit in the teva, or as soon as you see the dimensions of this beast, how did that survive the mabel? It must be that it couldn't get into the teva, so it must have been on that patch of dry land in Eretz Yisrael. But according to Rish Lakish, how did this huge animal survive? It definitely could not fit into the teva, and there was no dry land. Rabbi Yanai, it wasn't fully. They didn't have adults. There were no adults in there. They had to take baby ones. They had to take baby rams. Baby rams fit into the teva. Frank Gemara, you want to know how big a baby ram is? Or Zilo Derima. I saw a little baby Re'im. Bas Yoima. I saw this real Derima Bas Yoima, a 1 day old Re'im. A newborn baby. Let me tell you how small this was. Har Tovar, it was the size of Har Tovar. The Har Tovar Kamahavian. How big is Har Tovar? Arbon Parse 40 parsa is Har Tovar. How many parsa could someone walk in a day? I think 10 parsa. It's a huge amount of space. Moshchad Tavere, how long is the neck of this little infant Re'im? Talosa parsa, 3 parsais. Marbasa the Reisha, if it wanted to lay down its head on a pillow, you know how big that pillow would have to be? Parsa, Palga, a parsa and a half. Now here's where it gets exciting. When he saw this animal had to go to the bathroom. Rama Kava, it unloaded some packaged material, Visachar Yardina, and they plugged the whole yard with a little package left over by this animal. We're talking huge, and definitely this baby would not fit into the teva. The giraffe, that's right. So the giraffe was dwarfed by their aim. Rabbi Yochanan, you're right. It just had its head in the teva. Frank the more, but we just said even the head of this animal wouldn't fit in the teva. Ella roish, the technical word roish. He just put his nose into the teva so that he was able to breathe. Frank the Gemara, how could Rabbi Yochanan say that he put his nose in? Rabbi Yochanan could learn that the Re'im was on dry land, was in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yochanan was just saying, according to Rish Lakish, that there was a Mabel everywhere. The Re'im would have survived by keeping its nose in the Teva. Frank the Gemara, V'ha kasagi Teva. The Teva is bouncing around on the water, up and down, and the land that the Re'im would be standing on, sometimes it would be deeper, sometimes it would be shallower, depending on where they were standing. His nose is not going to always fit into the Teva, it's going to bounce around. Well, Amar Rish Lakish, Karnov Karshru B'Teva. its horns were tied to the teva so that it shouldn't be dislodged. Like the mask when they demonstrate your oxygen mask on the airplane, it had like straps, so his horns act as straps. I mean, it's hard to envision what this means. I don't know if this is Pashup Shot. Who cares if his nose was in the teva? He was cooking. He was going to be cooked. So how did he survive the hot waters? Frag the Gemara, if you have a problem with the water being so hot, what was the teva sealed with? With tar. Tar softens up in very hot water. So how did the teva withstand that heat? That's number one. We know Oig Melech HaBashan was water skiing the entire Mabul. He was hanging onto the teva, and the teva was pulling him. Oig Melech HaBashan, how come he didn't get cooked? Ella neis nasalahem shenitztanenu b'tzidi ateva. There was a neis that the water all around the teva was kept at a comfortable temperature. So Oig Melech HaBashan was protected in that force field of the teva, and maybe the Re'im was there too. And Oig was davening the whole time during the Mabul, I hope the Re'im doesn't have to go to the bathroom. Okay? Zog to Gemara weiter. Rab Shimon ben Lakish, Nehi Nami, the Yored Mabul Eretz Yisrael. Okay, the Mabul went to Eretz Yisrael. But Valei Posh, there would have been no bodies remaining in Eretz Yisrael because they would have drained down to a low spot. The Amar Shlakish, Lama Nikra Shma Mitzula. Why is Bavel referred to as Mitzula, as the depths? Shekol Meisei Mabul Nitztal Lusham. When the world drained of the water of the Mabul, everything drained down to the low spot. So all of the bodies, even if they were originally in Eretz Yisrael, would have drained down to Bavel. So maybe Eretz Yisrael is Baduk. So why did Shlakish say it's not Baduk? Rabbi Yochanan Amar Lama Nikra Shma Shinar, and Rabbi Yochanan said, why was the Eretz Shinar called Eretz Shinar? She called Meisei Mabul Nin Arusham. All of the Meisei Mabul were mished up over there. Dr. Gemara, it's not Kasha because he after yes, the vast majority of bodies, according to Rish Lakish, would taka being drained down to Bavel, but there's always one or two that'll get stuck in the mud there that wouldn't drain. Right? Everybody knows when they drain their bathroom, there's always a hair that just doesn't go down. Right? Zok Rashi, there would have at least been something there. Why is this land called Eretz Shinar? Shemina Eretz Ashirel. It shakes the wealth away from anybody that has any type of wealth. Why does it do that? Rashi says, Mipnei she'enon marachamim al abriyos. It's a place where they don't have rachmanis. And it says in Maseches Beitza, Ashirei Babel, Yoridei Gehenim. They're not going to be able to maintain their wealth. Frankly, Mar Aivak Chazinon, the Havu, there's wealthy people in Babel. How can you say it takes away wealth? There are wealthy people in Babel. Yes, there are wealthy people in Babel, but never do you see wealth remain in a family for 3 generations. Because the land, not Merachim al Briyoisov, wealth does not last. If you eat earth from Babel, ki ilu oichel basar avoisav. It's like you're eating the meat of your forefathers because you're eating the deteriorated, decomposed bodies of the Meisei Mabul. Tanya mihachi, kol oichel me'afer shel Babel, ki ilu oichel basar avoisav. V'yashayimrim, ki ilu oichel shkotzim u'remoshim. It's as if you're eating shkotzim u'remoshim because all the animals also were deteriorated. The reason why we have a Yesharim who says ki la'oichel shkotzim u'ramashim and not avoisav is because anybody who's alive today, his father didn't die in the Mabul. He must come from Noach. So it's not basar avoisav. Se'ir ha'mishtalech. The Mishnah says that the shir ha'mishtalech that was shechted b'chutz, there's no chiyuv for shchutei chutz. Frank the Gemara, I know it's hard to believe that we actually had almost a whole blot of Agad at the Gemara in Kachmal. I'm sliding. Are we still in Zvachim, or maybe I opened up the wrong Masechta today? Or a mini. It's Oi Carbon. Maybe it's referring to a carbon. What is this talking about? Zokt Rashi. When you say, before we see Rashi, so want to see the Torah Ara Sholem Oi Stalit. Says in the pasuk, "V'nikrav es carbon Hashem ish asher motzak lezov etzada v'tzamid No, I'm in the wrong place. I'm on hey. Vayis, no, here it is. Ve'el Pesach oil moed lo yeviyoi. We're talking about the Isser of Shchutei Chutz. La'agav Karban Hashem l'fnei Mishkan Hashem dom yechashav le'ishahu dom shofach. So how do we know that we're speaking only about a carbon of kedushas aguf, like an oil or a shlomim? Maybe oil carbon. Maybe I'm referring to a carbon of bedek abayis. Sheme'ani afilu kache bedek abayis shenikru carbon. You find the pasuk that refers to even bedek abayis as a carbon. So maybe even shechting bedek abayis b'chutz should be mechayiv you. Shenemar v'nikrav as carbon Hashem. And that was the pasuk I read earlier. This is when Klal Yisrael captured, I believe it was from the Midrashim, I think. Isha shemota kleizov etz odov etzamet abbas ogol v'chumos l'chaper nafsheshenu l'fnei Hashem, but it says carbon Hashem, so it refers to not animals, to things that could only be bedek abayis as a carbon as well. So you see, bedek abayis could also be referred to as a carbon, and maybe there's also chiv of shchutei chutz if you shech bedek abayis b'chutz. Talmud loymar in the parish of shchutei chutz the al pesach oyel moyed lo yeviyoi. Only misharoyu lovoy ba'oil moyed. Only a carbon that's supposed to be shechted in the Beis Hamikdash is there a chiv of shchutei chutz. Yotzu kache bedek abayis she'einon ru'uyin. So zok the Gemara oitzu as elu she'einon ru'uyin. Okay, I'll exclude kache bedek abayis, but v'loy oitzi as sir hamishter leach shuroyu lovoy al pesach hayil moyed. The sir hamishter leach is royu lovoy al pesach hayil moyed, because you have to take it in to do the gyro. So it belongs in the Pesach Moed at a certain point. Talmud loymer Lashem, you have the pasuk of Lashem to exclude a sira mishtaleach. Lahaiti sira mishtaleach. She'edem yuchad Lashem. So the problem is, our Mishnah says that how do we know to exclude a sira mishtaleach? Because it's not royu lovoy al Pesach Oyol. Why does this brisa need a special pasuk for it of Lashem? Why don't you use, just like in our Mishnah, the same pasuk that excludes any non-carbon, that it's not royal lavoy al pesach oil made? Kan kodim agrolo, kan lachar agrolo. Our Mishnah that says it's not royal lavoy al pesach oil made is speaking after the girl. After the girl, there is no need to have this animal in the oil made, so therefore it's excluded from the al pesach oil made leviyah. But this brisa asks, what about if you shechted the sir lazazel before the gyro? You shechted one of the two sir before the gyro. On that, we have the pasuk of Lashem. Lashem lahaji shir hamishtalech. Frek Gemara, achar agrola nami ha'ikavidui. What do you mean? Even after the gyro, the animal that's going to be sent as the shir hamishtalech, you need to say vidui on it. So it also belongs in the Pesach HaMoed. So, what's our Mishnah referring to? What type of animal of Mishnah Leach is our Mishnah referring to that you could exclude from Vel Pesach Oyel Moyed Lo Yeviyoi? Amaravani Loy Kasha. It's not fair. Kan Kodim Vidu, Kan Lacher Vidu. You're right. After the Vidui that said on the Sir Mishnah Leach, then it had no longer has any business in the Azara. And then we learn from Vel Pesach Oyel Moyed Lo Yeviyoi that there's no din Shchutei Chutz. But before Vidui, we need Lashem to exclude. Kavaltik. Haroiva v'nirva. Frank Gemara, if you remember, the Mishnah brought a new thing from a Mishkan Hashem. Labad is Mishkan Hashem. Frank Gemara, why couldn't you learn this out of the generic V'nami Tepik Lemi Pesach Oil Moed? So we're going to have to remain with this deep suspense until tomorrow to resolve this kasha. Tomorrow's the Domar Gata. We got